Welcome to Decoding TV's coverage of Lord of the Flies, a new series that's just hit Netflix. Lord of the Flies is a TV adaptation of William Golding's classic 1954 novel of the same name. It tells the story of a group of male British schoolchildren who are marooned on an island after a wartime evacuation flight crashes in the middle of the ocean. When the kids try to recreate some version of civilization to stay alive, things go horribly wrong. Lord of the Flies was adapted by Jack Thorne, who co-wrote the Netflix sensation Adolescence, that miniseries. And the episodes were directed by Mark Munden, who's made episodes of shows such as The Sympathizer, which Patrick Klepek and I both quite enjoyed, and Utopia, and many other shows that he's worked on as well. Lord of the Flies was originally a co-production between BBC and Australia, but now has come to Netflix. There are 4 episodes of the show. I've seen all 4. Patrick has seen 3. And given that this is a 60-plus-year-old, 70-plus-year-old book, there are going to be spoilers for both book and show in our coverage. But we are going to start with our overall non-spoilery thoughts. Patrick Klepek, what did you think of Lord of the Flies?
I think it's quite good. Obviously, a familiar tale for a lot of people. And so then the question becomes, what is this version of the story bringing? Now, I think on a base level, just retelling the same story, but sort of modern actor, like I think there is often look at plays, like you don't have to completely change what's happening to deliver a classic story to an audience. But here, gosh, like Lord of the Flies is not only a story that's been told before, but like it is so influential in terms of format that you've seen versions of this story told in all sorts of different ways. And so I think, you can feel the adolescence part of this telling of Lord of the Flies, I think, in which it is not necessarily sitting and thinking about what is Instagram and social networking doing to bullying and young boys and what they think of women, but it is very much, despite sort of the throwback in terms of where it takes place in the, it's in the timeline, feels very modern in terms of wrestling with and thinking about young boys, young children. What does it mean to exist in a society? And what happens when you strip all that stuff away? What parts of a young boy's personality come out as a result of that when they're suddenly forced to functionally act like an adult? And I think the differing perspective, focusing on one kid for each of the episodes, even though there's still obviously a lot of overlap between many of the children, is very good. And the child actors are excellent. Like, it is just really, really well cast. You frequently aren't really aware that you're watching children, other than obviously you look at them and like, these are kids, but they punch above their weight acting wise. So like, all told, like really good time is maybe not necessarily the words I'd use for something as bleak frequently as Lord of the Flies, but I found it a worthy reason to revisit this story, even if you're familiar with the beats.
Beautifully said, Patrick. And I think I'm right there with you. I think this is an excellent adaptation of the book. I've read the book when I was in high school. I've also seen the black and white film version of this story. And I really like this version. Now, let me describe some of the great aspects of this version. As you said, the casting is incredible. These really look like kids that are the age that they are depicting.
Yeah.
So much so that I'm like actively worried about them. And the actual actors, I'm like, are these people okay? There is a 1-hour making of documentary on Netflix that very much assures you they are doing okay. There's like a whole army of people that's job it is to make sure that like they only work a certain number of hours per day. They're in school. There's medical assistance available at any time, and you see the kids talking about the characters they play, which I thought was it's just very reassuring of like, okay, they're not psychopaths. They're not actually going to kill people, which is very nice. The documentarian at one point asked one of the kids the question, like, what have you learned about acting during this process making Lord of the Flies? And one of the kids said something very insightful, which is like, you don't want, like, if you're like, if the character is supposed to feel a certain emotion, like, don't show the emotion, feel the emotion, and then like the emotion will show up naturally, which I thought was very astute for these youngins. So the cast and the acting is great. But also, the location they've chosen for the island is amazing. It is. I don't think this show is as good as a Mad Max Fury Road stop, like in terms of how good that movie is as a kind of legendary film. a legendary action film. It's obviously a very different genre than this, but it reminded me of Mad Max Fury Road because they actually went to the place. This is not like a set where they're like everyone's safe in this jungle set on a stage. They went to a Malaysian island, I believe, and that's why the show looks incredible. Like it's like wow, like it really looks like they did the. Now, obviously, there's digital effects and so on,
They didn't
but
burn down half of Malaysian island.
you can tell that they like they had to go through. It looks like the shoot was hell because there's many instances in which like, oh, hey, it's raining. There's like tornadoes off the coast. Like we have to stop shooting today. Like rain is getting all on the director's like show Bible with all like the pictures and drawings and everything like that. And like his assistant is like drying it off with a hair dryer. You know, like it looks like it was really, really hard to shoot. It looks like something you'd only do if you were kind of unhinged. Like you thought, hey, we can do this. We can go to this island with all these kids and shoot it. And shooting with a bunch of kids, Patrick, as you may know from watching gatherings of kids when your kids are playing, not easy. Like it's not like they just all obey exactly what you tell them to do. And so it looked like it was extremely hard work, but that hard work shows up on screen in the form of like a gorgeous, gorgeous production. The show is extremely cerebral. There's many, many shots that just like linger on a setting or a boy's face or whatever. And it just goes on for like many, many seconds. And it really wants you to kind of like think about what you're looking at. It's very deliberately paced. And I think that can work for some people and it might not work for other people. And I understand if it like, I understand if there's people out there for whom the pacing does not work because it's really trying to be high art, which is kind of atypical on Netflix, to be honest with you. I do think, even though it's 4 hours long, this is a show that would have benefited from being in theaters. Like, I need to sit here and I watch and I can't look at my phone and I can't do anything else and like need to focus on this milieu and the feeling that the director is trying to convey in this scene because there's so many moments in the show that are just like really off kilter, strange, unsettling, and it's just not at the pace of a typical Netflix series. A couple of other things I just want to mention, and then I'll throw it back to you, Patrick. One is the score is very interesting. They're using kind of orchestral instrumentation of modern. Many of the pieces are like more modern. They're not like true classical, and it kind of gives it this off-kilter feel. In addition, they use the same composer for the White Lotus as this one, and you can kind of get an eerie feeling of like some of the original music is also White Lotus-y. And so that shout out to that. Many of the scenes take place at night, but are shot during the daytime because they are not allowed to shoot with the kids at night. And according to the making of, they used infrared cameras to shoot what's called day for night. So they shoot in the day as though it is night. And what the infrared cameras do is they make all of the greenery on the island red. And so all the plants and everything, it all just turns red at night. And I just thought that was interesting. They just like embraced that technology and were like, hey, we're going to make that work for us, which I thought was really fascinating. So a lot of great choices. Really, really interesting. I haven't even gotten to the themes yet, but I'll get into that. But yeah, Patrick, let's talk about things like pacing and score and day for night, and these kind of like I would say atypical choices for a Netflix series or an adaptation like this. Did all that work for you, or were you like, this is kind of a strange experience to watch this?
Well, in the strangeness, the sort of slippery nature of what you're watching, both in terms of what's presented and how much time has passed. Is it daytime? Is it night? I think that's all purposeful in this telling of the story. You never really have a great sense of the scale of the island. Like, it's not like this is a show that is constantly like going out to a big airplane or drone shot or a visual effect. It's like, all right, well, our characters are situated here, and you have a sense of like how long it would take to get, like, you are always kind of POV with the kids. And because even though the story is sort of told linearly, like we are always moving forward in time, the perspective switches, and like, where was this character when this thing was, it makes the whole thing kind of, I don't know, again, sort of ethereal, sort of hard to hold on to, I think, which then benefits the more sort of like elevated, high-minded sort of, I think, approach the adaptation is taking. And that part works for me, especially because I don't know that this would be, if you're unfamiliar with Lord of the Flies, I don't know that this would be like, well, that sounds like an interesting story. Maybe this isn't the first crack you take at like experiencing the story. Maybe go to the book or one of the other cinematic adaptations first. But I think this one works at its best for, frankly, people who are already familiar with the work and want to engage with it differently. Because I do think those sort of like long shots
right
on the kids, like it's trying to get at something that I think works best if you're not really concerned about like where's the story going, like how does this all get wrapped up. I still think even for the beats that are familiar, it's shot in an incredibly tense way. Like you said, there's a documentary showing how safe everything is, and yet fully convinced on these kids walking across like really treacherous like rock terrain sort of bridges where they could fall and crack their heads open, like the way they have to go through the jungle. All of it feels very tense, even though I have a sense of the ebb and flow and where things are going to end narratively. But all of that landed pretty well for me. I'm with you in that I think it also could completely not land at all for somebody. But I do think if you're familiar with the story, the aesthetic choices here, the stylistic choices here are made in part because of that familiarity and will, I think, best benefit anyone that's coming to this as sort of a further examination of a text they already are familiar with.
I think that's a great point, in the sense that, it's a show that if you expect a typical Netflix or prestige TV kind of pacing of, oh, what's the big cliffhanger at the end of the episode, and and we're gonna get to it's not really built for that. I don't think, right? It's divided into 4 episodes, and there is some suspense as to how things will wrap up, but it's not. It's more of like a meditation than it is a thriller. Like it has the trappings of a thriller, but it's more like we're gonna sit and think about what this story is about.
It could just be a 4-hour-long movie that had chapters, and it would functionally be the same.
Totally
the same thing.
I think it should be that. Honestly, I think it should be that. But
it might feel like yes, like sitting with it for the entire length of time versus like I watched it chopped up, and you get to the end of the episode. It's not really a show that you're like, cool, yeah, you know what? Play next episode.
At the end when the play next comes up, you want to actually page over to the option that says watch credits and sit and think about what you've just
seen. The end of episode 3, like. As I'm watching this, like a small kid's body float into the ocean and go away, I'm like, Now, if you're propelled into the next part, which is, like sort of just like stylistically, if it was edited and paced where it's going to feel like the conclusion of something before you're then, you get a title card, like thrusts you into the next character POV. I think that ultimately probably would have worked better than the format that it's in now. But
I want to say, Patrick, talking about the themes of the show and the book, and by the way, you should assume we're going to get into spoilers at this point. This is not an earth-shaking observation I'm making. I'm not saying like, I'm observing this.
Make it anyway, David. Take your swing.
With a lot of novelty, and you've never heard this before. But I think a lot of people, when you think of Lord of the Flies, is like, oh, wow, like it shows mankind's inherent savagery, right? Because it's like, oh, even these boys are killing themselves. They're just kids. They're not like adults, and so on. And yes, that's definitely true and definitely there. But when I was watching this, I couldn't help but think of the inverse or converse or whatever you want to call it, which is not that the boys are savage, but that, oh, wow, adults are literally victim to the same trends of thinking or same strains of thinking as these little boys. You have this one kid, Piggy, who is the smart one, and he's like, hey, we can't take a shit where we drink water from, and we need to keep a signal fire going so we can alert people that we're here, and so on and so forth. But no one likes him because everyone wants to have fun instead, and let's choose the chief who's good looking and wants us to have fun. And it's like, wow, I can't imagine where that impulse has led us astray in real life humanity ever in the last, let's say, 8 to 12 years. So I think it's a situation where, like, when I'm watching it, I'm thinking to myself how similar adults are to kids as opposed to how similar the kids are to the adults. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. Yes. No,
So anyway, I know that's not a new observation, but like that was what struck me the most is like, oh, when they're negotiating who's going to be the chief, it's like it's the same dynamic. We have the exact same dynamics in. I'm just going to put it out there. U.S. elections, like it's just the exact same dynamics, and nothing changes between when you're prepubescent, like you are in the show, to when you grow up. At least writ large for humanity.
Well, I think part of what works for me in the story and in this telling is, on some level, if you were to swap all of the kids for adults, how different would this story really be? But
Right,
I think the fundamental difference is and this show, I think the show does a great job of conveying. There's not like inner narration, but it finds different ways to convey an inner monologue for many different characters to externalize some of their internal feelings. Um, and as a result, sure, there are children do horrific acts of violence. Like there is incredible cruelty that plays out over the course of this story, but like the sympathy you have for like how things end up the way you are, the way they are in this story is just fundamentally different. With adults, like better. With these
right,
children, do they? Do
right,
they?
right.
And
Yeah.
what they are lacking in their ability to know better, whose fault is that? Theirs? And I think that's, so much about the story is, this exploration of, you know, you know, what do you pass on to kids? What values do they take away? What do they do when they are suddenly unmoored from your supervision and then forced to deploy that in the real world? And like the failures of a child to act like an adult have more to do with the failures of adults than they do with children. Um, and that's a huge part of what makes just Lord of the Flies as a story so compelling, because it was so easy just to make it adults and many of the same beats occur. It's like, yeah, of course, a bunch of men stranded on an island would start like going after
Right.
each other's throats, but it's like it plays so differently and gives you so much more to think about in terms of your own upbringing, the what ifs of what you would do in a situation when you have everything from, you know, like 13. I don't know what the exact ages of these kids are, but like we're, 10 to 13 sort of age, like
Yeah.
early teenage years, all the way down to what appear to be like 6 year olds, the little ones as they're described in this telling.
TVinsider.com has a great rundown of some of the big differences between the book and the TV show. And there are a couple I just want to highlight. First of all, one of the things that's different about the TV show than the book is like we get much more of the backstories of the kids. There's flashbacks, and we learn about like their family situations and things of that nature. I don't know that this really worked that much for me. Of them all, I think I was probably most compelled by Simon's backstory.
Hmm.
But I don't know that like the other backstories, like Ralph's backstory, really added that much to me. But it's worth pointing out that that is the case. Uh, one of the big ones, honestly, is there's a couple of big differences with Piggy's fate. First of all, in the book, you never learn what Piggy's real name is. And in the show, you learn his real name is Nicholas. And there's this amazing scene. So we're in full spoilers. Patrick hasn't even seen the episode yet, but in the final episode of the show, Piggy's death is very drawn out. Right in the book, he gets hit in the head with a rock and then falls to his death. In the show, he gets hit in the head with a rock and gets concussed, and then like kind of Ralph and Piggy kind of run away. They flee into the forest, and Ralph and Piggy like spend many hours together before Piggy eventually succumbs to his injuries. And they have this amazing moment of connection towards the end when Ralph apologizes for calling him Piggy, and Piggy forgives him, and it's like honestly, I was weeping like watching this amazing moment. Again, not in the book at all, but like in this TV adaptation, which I think is like to its credit. Also, you never find out Piggy's name in the book, and the fact that Ralph calls Piggy Nick or Nikki in the show is kind of an indication that of Ralph's like developing relationship with Piggy. Again, these are changes from the book. People can like them or not like them. I'm pointing them out. I'm saying like these are changes I personally appreciated, but they are changes. They are changes from the classic book. So, and yeah, that's basically what I wanted to highlight in terms of changes from the book. Anyway, end of the day, I think this is a wonderful adaptation. and well worth watching. But Patrick, as you in your typical fashion astutely put it, I think it's probably better if you already know the story, because then you're not like, oh, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen? And this show does not facilitate that type of watching. Hey everyone, David Chen here. Thank you so much for watching that video from Decoding TV. If you want to get an audio version of the show, all you got to do is go to podcast.decodingtv.com. And if you want to support what we do, get ad-free episodes of the podcast and also bonus episodes of the podcast, go to decodingtv.com and become a paid member. Of course, you can also like and subscribe for more. We appreciate it. Thanks. See you later.